Hello, hello. Who do I have on? Say something in the chat. 4 people. That's 4 more than I thought I was going to have. Fantastic. If you guys could put your name in the chat, let me know who's here. And please, you can start this whenever you'd like. Welcome to the Stephenson kitchen. It's a kitchen. Six people. Okay. And 1 like. Are you kidding me? I got 1 like. Marina, hi. Hi, Marina. Four likes. Are you kidding me? Hey, Javon, how you doing, buddy? And don't mind me. I'm just going to have a dessert while we do a review. What's up, Jake? Hi, Jack. 10 people. Oh, my goodness. Okay. So do me a favor. Whether you have a question about content or the exam tomorrow, the various sections of the exam, whatever your question might be, go ahead and type away in the chat. And then I'll just take like a systematic approach to Sparks Gaming. Who are you? I need to know who you are before I can answer that question. Hey, James, what's going on, buddy? Sparks Gaming, who are you? Hey, Gabby. Hey, Aiden. Sparks Gaming, you're not going to tell me who you are? Well, nothing's up. I just finished dinner. Had some. I had a tofu burrito. Hey, Gianna. Tofu burrito with some guacamole and some cauliflower bites. And now I'm enjoying a coconut ice cream, chocolate dipped with some almonds on it. That's what's up. So like I was saying before, whatever your questions are, please let me know. Type them into the chat, and then I will go ahead and get to them just kind of like one after the other. We did this last year, and it worked out really, really, really well. And again, if you're curious as to, I'm just got a notebook here. I'll probably scratch down some thoughts. Hey, Jacob. 5 likes. My goodness. Unbelievable. All right. Somebody start me off. What do we have here? Where are your minds right now in terms of tomorrow and the exam? Probably 3 hours and 15 minutes. If you think about this, 3 hours and 15 minutes was the time of the normal written exam. And the format, although it's changed a bit, right? We have, hey, Delana, how are you? We've got multiple choice questions and then the SAQ section, and that's 55 minutes and then 40 minutes. And then we have a 10-minute break. And then we have an hour and 40 minutes for the DBQ and 2 last SAQs. So that right there is about 3 hours and 15 minutes. Although you're taking it digitally, it still ends up to be about that time. So roughly 3 hours and 50 minutes. Hi, Mr. Stephenson. Carolyn, your favorite student. That's not a complete sentence. So I'm not quite sure what that means. So yeah, James, about 3 hours and 15 minutes, give or take. For all I know, I had somebody in my last class asked me like, hey, if we're done with this exam, like if we finish, like we get to the DBQ SAQ section, which is DBQ first. John Jay? Who is John Jay? John Jay. Hey, I'm just curious. Why am I not? Why is that not ringing a bell? But anyway, if you finish, early, it's going to probably prompt you with a message saying, "Are you sure you're done with your exam?" You'll hit OK, and then you'll be out of there. But really, I think it's in our best interest. John Kaufman, Johnny. Chips. I'm sorry, Chips. I'm so sorry. That's my nickname for John Kaufman, just in case anybody is curious, because he was constantly eating while on virtual sessions this year. But I loved it because he's got good taste in chips. 3 hours and 15 minutes. I've got a question from Gabby. Out of the Chinese dynasties, which is the one we should focus on the most? Let's break this down right now. I'm gonna write them all out on paper. Shangzhou Qin Han, Shangzhou Qin Han, Sui Tang Song, Sui Tang Song, Yuan Mingqing Republic, Yuan Mingqing Republic, Mao Zedong, Mao Zedong. Okay, I'm sorry about that, but I had to sing that song for you. Honestly, like technically speaking, according to our curriculum, the year started in terms of China with the Song Dynasty. I would be very surprised if there was a Song Dynasty question if there's going to be a Song Dynasty question, it's probably going to be on like a multiple choice question. And like, if I'm thinking out loud right now, it'll probably be like an excerpt from like a song source. And it'll probably have to do with like patriarchy or like foot binding, if you remember all the way back there. Shelby Lamontina with Marina? Is that Shelby? Oh, cool. Hey, Shelby. So Shelby, we're really switching gears here from today talking about Columbine and the 2000 presidential election to Chinese dynasties. So yeah. Chinese dynasties, if I had to guess, like the Song dynasty might be like a question set, probably like foot binding. And then after the Song dynasty, we know the Mongols take over China in roughly, like, let's call it 1280, under Kublai Khan, establishing the Yuan dynasty, right? Yuan. Is there going to be a question about Mongol rule of China on the exam? Like, again, maybe a multiple choice set. That's unit 2. Maybe about Mongol toleration, or like how the Mongols built their empire, yam system, tolerance, recognizing talent. I don't think there'll be a major focus of the exam. Honestly, I would say probably like if there's going to be a series of questions, it'll be like the Ming and Qing. And I say that just because Ming Dynasty 1368 to 1644, and then Qing Dynasty 1644 to about 1911. Those periods of time are the most tested on the exam. So again, the Qing Dynasty really fits between like throughout periods 3, 4, 5, and 6. Again, periods 3 and 4 are 1450 to 1750, and periods 5 and 6 are 1750 to 1900. So I guess my answer might be the Qing Dynasty. That's probably what I'd say there. In terms of Gabby's question of the Chinese dynasties, probably the Qing Dynasty, if I'm not mistaken. Which unit do you think would be most concerned on the multiple choice? Honestly, Aiden, which unit for multiple choice? Units 3, 4, 5, and 6. They are equally weighted in terms of the exam. If you actually like go to the exam page and check out the curriculum, I linked you that document all the way back in September. The bulk of the exam, you are statistically more likely to get a multiple choice question from units 3, 4, 5, or 6. You're going to definitely have like a question or two from units 1, 2, and then 7, 8, and 9, but a bulk of the multiple choice questions will be on those units that I just mentioned, units 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay, great question. Thank you, both of you, everybody. Great question so far. Love it. Let's see. Hey, Alex. Sorry if I didn't say hello. Can you quickly review the Sunni and Shia? It was mentioned in the College Board videos. Yeah, sure. So if you go all the way back, to when we first introduced Islam, okay, and that's going to be like a unit. Yeah, we introduced Islam back in unit 1. So probably notes from like September, October, maybe into like November. The Sunni Shia split occurs, and this is in its most simplistic form, but the Sunni Shia split occurs after the death of Muhammad in about 632 AD. Remember that Muhammad is the founder of Islam. He is the prophet of Islam. Which is a monotheistic faith founded by Muhammad in Saudi Arabia, right, in the late 6th and early 7th centuries. And when he dies in 632, some of you might remember me saying this in class, when he passes away in the year 632, it's not just that like he's a religious leader passing away. He is a military leader, a political leader. He's an economic and social organizer, and he is considered to be this final prophet of really the Abrahamic religions, right? This monotheism that is very much present in the Middle East. And so when he dies, there's a succession crisis. Essentially, the question is, okay, Muhammad was this visionary of a leader. He's dead now and did not declare an heir to his position. So who will lead Dar al-Islam? Who will lead the land of Islam? And essentially, Sunnis are in the majority, believing that any qualified Muslim should be able to lead the Islamic community, or the Ummah, U-M-M-A. Okay? Whoever Joe is, I'm going to ask that you leave. I'm going to remove you myself. That's a really bizarre name and not a question I understood. So back to the Sunni Shia split. So when we're looking at this, the Sunnis are the Muslim majority who view that any capable Muslim, someone who is devout, someone who's kind of a dynamic personality should be able to lead the Ummah. And then the Shia mostly, and again, I'm really kind of generalizing here for what you need to know for the exam, if that's even on the exam. The Sunni Shia split is, honestly, I'll tell you after this where it could come up, because the origins are not going to come up on the exam, because this occurs in the 7th century. And the curriculum starts in the year 1200. The Shia are individuals who believe that Muhammad's blood, direct descendants of Muhammad should be able to rule, lead the lands of Islam. So do I think like that history is going to be on the exam? No, they can't do that. That's going to be way before our start time in Unit 12. Here's where the Sunni Shia split might come up. I'll tell you right now. Do you remember going over the Islamic gunpowder empires in Unit 3? We talked about 3 of them. The Ottomans in the Middle East and Africa, the Safavids in Persia, what is today Iran, and then the Mughals in India. Now, if you can think geographically, the Mughals in India were Sunni Islam. the Ottomans in the Middle East and Africa were Sunni Islam. The Safavids in the middle, sandwiched in between them, if you have a map right now that you're looking at, the Safavids were what we call Twelver Shiism. And if you go back to your notes, that's something that I mentioned there. And like, that's what fuels the state conflict between the Ottomans and the Safavids, and between the Safavids and the Mughals. A lot of what they're fighting over, sure, it's territory and various borders, but a lot of what's driving the conflict between those two groups, and I believe the battle I mentioned in class was the Battle of Chaldiran. That should be in your notes, between the Shia Safavids and the Sunni Ottomans. Like, that's a really great example of the Shia-Sunni split playing out into violence in Unit 3, the Gunpowder Empires. So, Gabby, great question. I hope that makes sense. If it didn't, please let me know. Please, if there's anybody on here right now who needs something restated or rephrased, please do not be afraid to say that, okay? So that was Sunni Shia. John J., can you please go over the sequence of things we will be doing on the exam again? Yeah, absolutely. So you're going to sign in. You're going to sign in at like 11:30 or 11:35 or 11:40, and you're going to access the digital testing app by, going to apps, clicking on it, and it'll give you a little sign-in page. Put all your information in, and then it'll give you like a little waiting room, like, hey, congratulations, you're signed up for this exam. And then it'll give you a little counter in terms of when the exam will start. The exam will start promptly at 12 p.m. noon. And the first section you'll get into is the multiple choice. That's 55 stimulus-based multiple choice questions. You'll have 55 minutes to do it. Now, again, remember in class when we did the digital exam practice, you saw exactly what those questions would look like. And some of you still have the option to go back into the app right now or later if you'd like, and check out the app demo. That's a shorter practice. It shows you exactly what the multiple choice questions would look like. Okay, so multiple choice first, and then you finish that. Let's say you finish with 3 minutes left. You take 52 minutes. You finish the multiple choice section. You are now sitting for roughly 3 minutes, waiting for the next section, which is the SAQ, the short answer question. You get 3 of these questions, and you have a block of 40 minutes to go ahead and do that. Okay, 40 minutes. We said in class that roughly works out to like 13.3 minutes per question, more than enough time for an SAQ, okay? And then once those 40 minutes are up for the SAQ section, you're going to get like a 10-minute break. I'm not quite sure what that screen will look like, but it'll probably say like, 10 minutes until the next section, and then it'll count down. I would recommend using that time to hydrate, go to the bathroom, get your scratch paper ready for the DBQ, take a couple deep breaths. Like seriously, maybe like just get up and walk away from your station. You know what I mean? Really kind of like clear your mind for a moment before you return to stare into the darkness that is the black void of the DBQ, as Heimler would say. That's going to be the break period. And then when that break is over, there's going to be a little hour and 40-minute timer that comes down on your screen, and you'll see the DBQ. And that'll be the third thing you have to do is the DBQ. Now, remember in class, I said that it's recommended you take an hour for the DBQ, but I think some of you who might be a little bit slower in terms of your reading ability, take an extra 5 or 10 minutes. Take an extra 5 or 10 minutes from your SAQs and apply them to the DBQ, okay? And there's nothing you have to do. That you just have to kind of keep an eye on the timer and know that like after an hour passed, like, maybe an hour and 10 minutes, it's probably time to go to the SAQ section, okay? But it's recommended you do an hour for the DBQ. Then you'd finish that, hit next, and then, you know, it would take you to the SAQ section, okay, where there's 2 questions, and you get 40 minutes for both questions, right? 20 minutes a question. That's fantastic. You know, we talked about a normal SAQ. You only have 13.3, you know, minutes to do the question. This time you've got, you know, if you have it, 20 minutes per question. That's almost too much, in my opinion. And then you're done. That's it. 2 sections, an A and B to each. So section 1, part A, multiple choice. Section 1, part B, SAQs, 3 of them. Then a 10-minute break. Section 2, part 1, DBQ. Section 2, part 2, 2 SAQs. And then you're done for a grand total of about 3 hours and 15 minutes. John, I hope that helped. If it didn't, if you'd like that covered again, please, you can go on to the AP website, AP World History. Just search AP World History exam, and if you scroll down, that will be there for you. The entire breakdown of the exam will be there for you. Okay? I think it's time for a chocolate break. Delicious. Okay. Great break. Gianna says, which units do you think would be most covered on the SAQ and DBQ? Again, because they're the most weighted in terms of the curriculum, I would say units 3, 4, 5, 6. And then after that, it's just a guessing game. But I would say those core units, okay? I would say those core units would be covered on the SAQ/DBQ, if I had to guess, just based on their curriculum weight. But it could be anything, which is terrifying, okay? Gabby again said, John, you're welcome. You're welcome. Great question. Could you please review the Protestant Reformation as well? Yeah, sure. So Protestant Reformation, let's go to Europe, and let's go to Europe after the Black Death and after the Crusades. So the Crusades was a series of holy wars fought between basically Western Europe and the various Islamic groups in the Middle East. Fought primarily over Jerusalem in the Middle East. Those crusades were fought from roughly 1100 to 1300, on and off again for like 200 years. It did not go well for Christianity in Western Europe. Let's just put it that way. So hold that in the back of your heads for a moment. Flash forward 50 years, Black Death, 1350. Wipes out about a third of Europe's population. And there's nothing the Catholic Church does that fixes the problem. So I want you to think about this. The Catholic Church is largely unsuccessful in its quest for the Crusades. And the Catholic Church doesn't really have the answers for when the Black Death is taking millions of Europeans, millions of European Christians. And so ultimately, there is this like little weakening of the church's authority and power throughout Europe because they don't really have a response to those 2 things I just mentioned, the Crusades and the Black Death. And so ultimately, you have a few different people rise up and actually begin to challenge the Catholic Church, which is something like you just didn't do in the hundreds of years leading up to the Protestant Reformation. You didn't challenge the church because what might happen is they would declare you a heretic and then have you killed for challenging their teachings, their authority, their biblical interpretations, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So eventually, if you look back in your notes, right, we talked about really 3 different men. I mentioned John Wycliffe from England, Jan Hus from what we would call Czechoslovakia, and then, of course, Martin Luther, who is from what you and I would call Germany today, although it's not Germany during, you know, when he's alive. And for all intents and purposes, we can say that the Protestant Reformation really begins with Martin Luther. In 1517, he publishes his 95 Theses, which is essentially a massive attack against the Catholic Church. He's calling them out for being corrupt. He's calling them out for something called simony, Simony, basically the selling of church positions to anybody who could afford it. He's calling them up for greed. He's calling them out for indulgences, the selling of what were thought to be blessed, basically get out of hell free cards. And he's basically kind of calling out all these issues with the Catholic Church. He thinks priests should be able to get married. He's got a lot to say about the Catholic Church. And because the printing press is invented like 50 years before, a lot of his work is able to spread like wildfire around Europe. And essentially, the Protestant Reformation becomes this movement of a divide in Christianity. We begin to have a Catholic branch and a Protestant branch. And the Protestant branch, just like the Catholic branch, has many different denominations and interpretations. But essentially, this starts with the workings and writings of Martin Luther in the early 16th century. Like I said, the 95 Theses is published in about 1517. And again, Luther's operating in a place called Wittenberg, in one of the German states. And he starts off his career as he's going to be a lawyer, and then like changes paths, becomes a priest, becomes a monk. Ultimately, he becomes a university theologian, professor of theology, and just becomes disaffected by Catholicism and begins to articulate his thoughts in the early 1500s. And that culminates with the publishing of his 95 Theses. Ultimately, he's excommunicated from the church, which means that he's kicked out of the church, and his teachings go on to form the basis of what most people would call Protestantism today. So again, Protestant Reformation think a split in the church. Now, this is really important because not only do you have massive warfare that occurs across Europe as a result of this, Catholics fighting Protestants and vice versa, you also have something that we call the Catholic Reformation after this, where it's basically Catholic organizations saying, oh, we're a little worried about this new Protestantism, so we really need to make sure we get our version of the Christian faith out there. And for those of you who are wondering, this syncs up pretty nicely with the age of exploration, and maybe that's one of the reasons why there's so much Catholicism being spread, particularly to Latin America, the African coastline, and the coastlines of India and Southeast Asia during the 14 and 1500s, because of that Protestant Reformation. So we talked in class. One of those Catholic Reformation groups was the Jesuit Society, the Society of Jesus, who were missionaries traveling the world to spread the Catholic faith, right? And they're doing this because they were quite worried about Protestantism as a rival religion. So, Gabby, I know you said quickly review the Protestant Reformation. If that helps, great. If you want something more, please let me know. But that's kind of like an overview. Okay. Anna, could you also post the Enlightenment review too, please? When you say post, do you want me just to talk about it, or are you actually asking something for me to post? Just out of curiosity. Again, guys, fill in the message function with questions right now. I'm going to come right back. I'm just going to go to the bathroom real quick, okay? Be right back. Okay, I am back. You're welcome, Gabby. Thank you. If anything else comes up, obviously, please let me know. The Kahoot review for the Enlightenment. I'm on my Google Classroom right now. Let me just make sure. Yeah, so I don't have any way to share my screen right now, but Anna, I did post it. If you go to Google Classroom and you go to classwork, click on Kahoot reviews, scroll down a bit, you'll see 7 and 8, Unit 6, and then you'll see in a big post from April 13th, I posted Kahoot review units 0, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, and it's the one on the bottom. That's unit 5. Make sure you can find that right now. I posted that quite a while ago, and the first, let's see, the first like the first 9 questions are about the Enlightenment. Okay, so that's already on whatchamacallit. That's on the Kahoot review under a classroom. So please let me know if you can find that. Okay. And then okay, so a little bit about the Enlightenment, right? Notice how the Enlightenment is in the revolutions unit. That's unit 5, 1750 to 1900. So the Enlightenment, right? The Enlightenment is this intellectual revolution. And when I say intellectual revolution, I mean a period of time in which there is very rapid thought and writing regarding the way in which human beings organize themselves politically, economically. And so this isn't necessarily a revolution with guns and concerned with overthrowing a government. The Enlightenment is a revolution of ideas. Okay. Essentially, you have a lot of French and English thinkers primarily. The Enlightenment is primarily formed and born in the late 1600s, early 1700s in England and France. And the names you might remember from England, John Locke, and from France, Denis Diderot, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, right? You had Thomas Hobbes from England as well. Adam Smith, the founder of capitalism from Scotland. Voltaire from France. Charles Baron de Montesquieu from France. And essentially all of these men, and again, you can go back and I think this is in a content video I made, but actually I'm pretty sure it is. But you can go back and all of these men basically have very new ideas about what good government looks like. These are men who were mostly sick and tired of divine right monarchy, who wanted a new system of government. So for instance, as an example, one of the new ideas to emerge out of the Enlightenment period was the concept of consent of the governed. And this is something that like John Locke talks about quite frequently in all of his writings. And he's got a series of very famous writings. So when he's talking about consent of the governed, he truly believed that whatever government looks like, its power, its authority should come directly from the people, meaning the people essentially have a say in what the government looks like and who is a part of government. And the best example I can give you of that today would be the American system of what you would call our democratic republic. The fact that every 4 years we have a presidential election in which the people, literally the citizens of the United States, go out and vote for who they want in office, right? There is no divine right monarchy. There is no hereditary-based monarchy. We have a system in which the people form the basis of government, right? That is at the core of the founding of our country. It's in all of our revolutionary documents, including the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States, which are both directly inspired by the Enlightenment. Okay, so again, concepts of natural rights, the fact that you and I as human beings, this idea that like you and I are born with inalienable rights, life, liberty, and property. These are all Lockean ideas. These all come from John Locke. And so these ideas, they're fantastic on paper, right? But if you'll recall, I want you to think about like the sequence of Unit 5. It goes Enlightenment and then Atlantic revolutions. And so the Atlantic revolutions are actually people taking the ideas of the Enlightenment and actually applying them and being like, yeah, we're done with this king. We're done with this divine right monarchy. So that's the cool thing about Unit 5. It starts with the Enlightenment. Think of the Enlightenment as the foundation, and then all of those revolutions stem directly from the Enlightenment. And that's all covered in the Kahoot Unit 5. Anna, if you want something specifically more than that, just let me know, say the word, but that's a general overview of the Enlightenment period. Carolyn, what a doozy. I know this might be a lot, but can you kind of go over Unit 4 briefly? Sure. That's a lot. Unit 4, transoceanic interconnections. What's going on in Unit 4, which is 1450 to 1750? Okay, if I could summarize this unit in one word, exploration. This unit is completely focused on Europe using various technologies to try and find a direct route to India and the Spice Islands. And the result is global exploration being done at the hands of Europe. One of the results of this global age of exploration is that Europe begins the process of colonizing the world. We've got British colonization in North America, in Canada, and what you and I would today call the United States. We've got Spanish colonization in what you and I would call Latin America, Mexico, Central America, and South America. We've got the Portuguese in Brazil. We've got multiple states colonizing the coastline of Africa, India, and Southeast Asia. And so Unit 4 is all about the early stages of European exploration and colonization. Okay. Hey, Isabella, how are you? That's Unit 4 in a nutshell. The other piece to Unit 4 is, okay, what are the results of all of this colonization? Like, how do these European empires manage their colonies? And in Spain, Spain and Latin America, we talked the Sociedad de Castas, the caste system. We talked about the encomienda system and coerced labor, the rise of the slave trade, sugarcane plantations, cash crops. That's all Unit 4 in a nutshell. Carolyn, I hope that helps. Okay, do me a favor. If there's anybody who wants like any of these units in a nutshell, there's a couple of great places on YouTube, but also you can go to the curriculum, which again is posted somewhere on Google Classroom, but the curriculum would be like an entire unit summarized in just like a few pages. So that's definitely very powerful. Okay, Carolyn, I hope that helps. Jared asked, is there some sort of practice DBQ I could complete tonight? Yeah, for you're welcome, Carolyn. So Jared, for weeks now, I've opened up a couple other samples on my AP. So you should log in there, check assignments, and there should be at least two sample DBQs. But also, if you look in your AP review books, you should have 3 DBQs in those review books that you guys have at home that you've had since November. Jared, if you can't find those, if you don't have those, let me know and I can just kind of send you one over. But they're on my AP. You can go back and rewrite one that we did from the beginning of the year. You know, now that you've practiced more, you can go back and rewrite the Indian one, the Indian Ocean one. Whatever you need, let me know, Jared. And I can definitely send you a new one if you'd like. Okay. Ashley, what tips would you have for DBQs, as in how to group information used in arguments to your counter argument, how to make a good thesis, etc.? So really, in terms of a good thesis, it's just going to answer the question. It's going to be one sentence that answers the question, and it will be a combination of the grouping of documents. And in terms of like how to group the documents, when you read all of the 7, you should notice that like there's always going to be a few that are like very similar. And so like that's something you need to kind of cue in right away in terms of like your scratch paper being like, okay, I just got done reading documents 3 and 4. 2 really seems like it has a lot in common with 3, and 4 seems like it has a lot in common with document 1. So like the process is all about just making notes of that as you're going along to kind of, you know, help you multitask later. But that's kind of the best piece of advice I could give you, is that these documents are chosen on purpose, Ashley. They're always going to have, you know, there's always going to be a couple documents that are very similar. And then there's always going to be like an oddball document, or maybe even 2 that like just don't stick out. So Ashley, I want you to think about the DBQ we went over in class today, right? You basically had documents 5 and 6, the 2 Chinese documents that were just like, they didn't fit in with the rest, right? And so as you were reading the other documents, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 7, hopefully you had this feeling of like, well, all of these documents seem to embrace westernization or modernization, but documents 5 and 6 don't. So that's like a really good way of what I was talking about, like, you know, with grouping. You know, very clearly documents 1, 2, 3, 4, and 7 belong together, and 5 and 6 belong together. But you could also break it down even further and say that, like, well, document 7 and document 2 or 1, document 7 and document 1 are really focused on economic reform, whereas documents 2, 3, and 4 are focused on this other reform. It's just up to you to find the commonalities between the documents. That's the most important part. Okay. Ashley, I hope that helped. But what I might do is go back to Google Classroom, check out my early DBQ presentations from earlier in the year, and hopefully that can help you. Okay. But if anything comes up, Ashley, regarding the DBQ, anything else, please let me know. But that's, in terms of grouping and thesis, that's what I would say. Okay. Alexis, can you quickly go over the definitions of nationalism, socialism, and communism? Yeah, so these are all period like 5 and 6 concepts. I want you to think about this, right? After the Enlightenment, after particularly the French Revolution, there's a lot of talk about like what a nation is and like what a country is. And that's essentially the core of nationalism. Nationalism is this intense identification. I want you to think about that. We as human beings tend to identify in a multitude of ways, right? You may identify as a student, right? You may identify as a sister, a brother. You may identify yourself based on the fact that you live in Hazlitt, okay? Nationalism is relatively new for periods 5 and 6. It's a way in which human beings identify themselves with a particular nation. This is not empire. This is not like belonging to a city-state. Nationalism is this intense belief that you belong to a definitive country with a definitive border, with a definitive shared culture and history, usually with a definitive language. So if you Google definition nationalism right now, it's going to be like this intense love and belief that like you and other people like you are part of the same nation. Okay, that's nationalism in a nutshell. Socialism, in terms of like I can give you guys a modern definition of socialism, but in terms of what you need to know for the exam, socialism is an ideology. Hold on real quick. So I see Carolyn said, are there any tips you can give that will help break down pictures on the DBQ? And then Isabella said, can you go over how to source the documents that are pictures in the DBQ? Yeah, we'll talk about that both. I'll hit Carolyn and Isabella's question as soon as we get there. Great questions, girls. So in terms of our class, you're going to have to go back to the video I made on capitalism, socialism, and communism, because in that, I kind of give you exactly what you need to know in terms of socialism. Socialism really really begins to get thought about and developed after the Industrial Revolution. And I want you to think about why this is. I want you to contextualize why this is. The Industrial Revolution has innumerous benefits. It lowers the cost of manufactured goods because now we're able to produce so much more. It leads to great innovations in terms of technology, steamship railroad, and communication, telegraph, telephone, ultimately automobile, etc. There's a lot of positives about the Industrial Revolution. But one of the negatives is that the Industrial Revolution leads to a lot of people flocking into cities, and it leads to a lot of people looking to get factory jobs. Factory jobs that don't necessarily pay the greatest, factory jobs that have some pretty deplorable working conditions. And so socialism is one of these ideologies that arises after the Industrial Revolution. And early socialists are people who say, gee, there's a lot of wealth in the nation right now, whether this is England or France or eventually Germany. And socialists are kind of constantly calling for, we need to make things better for the working man. Socialists are trying to reform labor. Socialists essentially are asking for, to one degree or the other, they're asking for a redistribution of wealth. They're essentially saying that these workers in the factories, this is the reason why we're able to have an industrial revolution, yet these people are working in terrible conditions and they're getting paid nothing. So we need to have a system that takes care of these people, because these are the people who make everything. These are the bread and butter. This is labor. And so early socialism represents this group of people who are trying to fix the downsides of the Industrial Revolution. Okay, and again, the key term to remember with socialism is, socialists are calling for this, very generally, this kind of redistribution of all of the wealth that's in society. They're asking for workers to be treated, more fairly. Okay. Now, communism, in terms of this class, there's one man you should know, and he's mentioned in that video I mentioned. That's Karl Marx. Marx was born in Germany. He ultimately was chased out of Germany in the 19th century. He ends up moving to England, where he meets a man by the name of Joseph Ingalls. And together in 1848, they write something known as the Communist Manifesto. And again, I would say that both Marx and Engels are socialists. If you read the Communist Manifesto, it's all about trying to make things better for the working men of the world, the people who are in working class factory jobs. Marx is talking about how these people have nothing and that they're the base of society. But Marx begins to formulate this idea in the mid-1800s. Again, he publishes the Communist Manifesto in 1848. Marx begins to formulate this idea that capitalism isn't the future. Okay. He said that capitalism is going to run its course, Meaning, and when I say capitalism, I mean like, people are, Jared, you do not have to attend class tomorrow. You're staying home. It's an excused absence. Okay. I just wanted to answer that question real quick. Again, you do not need to attend class tomorrow. It's an excused absence. You don't come on virtually. You don't show up to school. Okay. It's an excused absence. So with, Marx's version of communism, he believed that capitalism was kind of this like basic state of humanity in the 1800s, and that ultimately the proletariat, or the working class individuals of societies around the world, would actually overthrow who Marx called the bourgeoisie, the kind of middle class owners of factories, like the very wealthy segments of society. There's a great image in that Kahoot we did in class that covers that. Remember that like pyramid? Marx said that ultimately the proletariat would reach a breaking point, a point at which they just were going to refuse to work. Conditions would get so bad that they would actually overthrow the bourgeoisie and take control of what Marx called the means of production. So land, factories, things along those lines. And then eventually Marx said that after a little period of time in socialism, right, human beings would eventually reach this final stage called communism. Now, here's the deal. Communism has never been reached. Communism has never been practiced officially in terms of Marxian terms by any state ever, because communism, as Marx saw it, was going to be this country or state that didn't have any classes, didn't have religion, and didn't have government. It would basically just be people living in communion with one another. Hence communism, if you see that word communion in there. Now, you have to remember that Marx is not a political leader. Marx is a philosopher, a thinker, an economist. He is not someone he's not any type of government official. He's not even like an elite. He's just a thinker and a writer. So he's convinced himself that this will happen eventually. Capitalism will be overthrown by the proletariat. Socialism will be established, in which all the workers kind of own everything, together, and that ultimately the final stage would be this idea of communism, in which there are no classes, there's no government, and everybody kind of owns everything equally. Now, if you ask me, Marx is a philosopher, so that's part of what his job was, to think about to think about what the world could be like. Is it ever successful? Is there any state in human history that has successfully achieved Marxian communism where there's no classes and no government? No. And I think people wrongly hold up the Soviet Union as an example of that, but that couldn't be farther from the truth. So communism as it exists in our curriculum is kind of like, an end game that Marx thought people could get to, but it proves impossible. But the thing to remember, if socialism is going to be on the exam, it'll be looked at in terms of it being a reaction to the evils of the Industrial Revolution, to the evils of industrial capitalism. Okay. Now, I saw a message up here from Carolyn saying, "Is communism good? Is it bad?" It's not my place to say any ideology is good or bad. I will tell you right now that, as practiced historically, industrial capitalism, state socialism, which is what I would argue the Soviet Union was, every single system has its strengths and weaknesses. There is no this is good, this is bad. Now, if you want to talk like political styles in terms of like dictatorships versus democratic republics okay, fine, like I'm gonna be on the side of a democratic republic, almost every single time. But it's very hard for me to make a value call as if something's good or bad. Are we talking ideologically as it exists on paper, or like, it's very hard to argue anything historically considering that never existed. So you have to be cautious here. But Anna, I hope that helps. Again, I would recommend watching that video again if you get a chance to. Aiden, can you briefly go over World War I? Yeah, sure. 1914 to 1918. The causes of World War I are Main, MAIN, militarism, alliance system, imperialism, and nationalism. Essentially, you've got the assassination of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo, which is in the Balkan Peninsula in Southeast Europe. Okay. I said socialism was a reaction of the Industrial Revolution. That's okay. I'm sorry. Gianna, this is exactly what I want. Please take the time to ask questions. The Industrial Revolution has a lot of people working in factories, a lot of people who are working in deplorable conditions, who are living deplorable lifestyles, and a lot of early socialist reformers wanted a way to fix that. They wanted to redistribute a little wealth to the workers, and that's generally like this stage of socialism that we're talking about. So World War I, again, 1914 to 1918, you essentially have Russia coming to the aid of Serbia. You have France allied with Russia, and then England allied with France. So you had the Triple Entente powers. That's Russia, France, and Great Britain facing off against Germany, of the German Empire, Italy, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire, also the Ottoman Empire. So you had the Triple Entente versus the Triple Alliance. And essentially, this is a brutal 4-year conflict. Much of it is fought in Europe, both Western and Eastern. Devastating casualties because of the technology that's being used: machine guns, trench warfare, barbed wire. Early tanks are being used. Some naval warcraft, German U-boats and submarines. There's a whole host of new technologies that are being used. But unfortunately, the way I like to break this down, the reason why World War I is so disastrous, it's got such a high death toll, is because early on in the war, you have commanders using, and I really want you to listen to this because this is just one of those human tragedies that's so unfortunate. You have commanders on both sides, the Triple Entente and the Triple Alliance, using 19th century tactics. So charges and cavalry charges and looking at trying to fight your enemy, head on. They're using 19th century tactics with 20th century technology. Heavy artillery is something else that's being used, and it's a nightmare. In 1914, 1915, 1916, these are going to be the largest casualties that any war will see up until this time, and it'll be fought to a devastating stalemate in Western Europe on the Western Front. Ultimately, the United States will get involved and will push the Entente powers to victory. The war is over in 1919 with the signing of the Treaty of Versailles, in which Germany is forced to take all the blame, which leads to a big embarrassment on behalf of the German people, which you could then say leads directly to World War II and the rise of Adolf Hitler. Okay. So that's again, World War I, if it's on here, it's going to be about like the technology used, which is pretty easy, or the causes. And again, if you wanted the acronym for causes, that's MAIN, MAIN, militarism, alliance system, imperialism, and nationalism. Okay. And that's broken down in a content video for you. Jacob Sullivan, can you explain the consequences of the Opium Wars? Sure. Opium Wars, 1850s and 1860s, Great Britain versus China. Great Britain selling a lot of opium illegally in China, and the Chinese don't want it. So what do the Chinese do? They start burning a lot of the opium. They pass anti-opium laws. What does Great Britain do? You're infringing on our trade product. Great Britain invades China, wipes the floor with them. Okay, what's the outcome? Couple things. Number one, Great Britain forces China to sign a bunch of what we call in the historical community unequal treaties. Basically, Great Britain bullies China into signing a bunch of treaties that give Great Britain special rights to operate in China. That's the first major consequence. Number two, China is embarrassed internationally because they lose to, as Document 6 would say, a barbaric Western power. Number three, within China itself, this causes like an identity crisis because the Chinese military loses so bad. There's immediately calls for reform and modernization, and China becomes very split as to what that modernization should look like. In your notes in my content lectures, this is known as the self-strengthening movement, a movement in China after the Opium Wars by several elites in China to try to modernize their society. Unfortunately, the woman in power at the time, Empress Qi Shi, the one who made the boat in Document 5, doesn't want to modernize because she's kind of stuck in traditional Chinese mode of what China had been in terms of a great power. So those are the consequences that you need to be aware of. Give me 1 second. I'm going to say goodnight to Blake. Maybe I can get her out here for a second, and then I will come back and summarize Unit 1 for Isabella. Love you, sweet girl. Hey, Taylor, how you doing? Taylor, that's great. I haven't seen you all year. I hope you're doing well. If you ever get the chance, stop by. For those of you who don't know, Taylor was a rock star AP World History student last year. Taylor, if you have any advice for these students, please go ahead and give them that. And thank you so much for stopping by. This made my night. That's amazing. Isabella, Unit 1 is massive. To go over that right now would be quite a bit, but let's think about this. Unit 1 is the global tapestry. Okay, it's 1200 to 1450, and it basically is setting the foundation for the rest of the year. So in Unit 1, we covered Islam. We started in East Asia with the Tang and Song dynasties. We took a look at what was going on in the Americas in terms of the Aztecs and Incas. Okay. We took a look at the Silk Roads and Indian Ocean Trade Network. Unit 1 was when we read Linda Schaefer's Southernization, looking at how the world was interconnected even in Unit 1 because of trade. We looked at the spread of Hinduism and Buddhism from India to Southeast Asia. We looked at the South Asian state of Vijayanagara. We looked at the Islamic Caliphate, Dar al-Islam. We looked at the Turkish people who came in and conquered Dar al-Islam after the collapse of the Abbasid Caliphate. We studied the Golden Age of Islam under the Abbasid Caliphate. I gave you a reading on the Golden Age of Islam. And then we very briefly looked at Europe being sort of in a dark age in Unit 1, 1200 to 1450, while the rest of the world was kind of going through this enlightened period. Okay. That's Unit 1 in a nutshell. It's kind of this broad spectrum of laying the foundation. Okay. Now, Carolyn and Isabella said, "Hey, the pictures. With the pictures, in terms of sourcing them, like think about what I did for Empress Chi Shi, the boat for unit or for the boat for document 5. You guys have that presentation. I shared that with you, and I sourced that document right on the screen. No problem, Isabella. Listen, I know that was very general, but there's a lot in Unit 1. The good thing is we took a copious amount of notes on Unit 1, but if you can find a quick review video, that might help too. But if there's something specific you had wanted, please let me know. But those are all the things that really come to my mind. In terms of images, just try to take a look at it. If it's an overwhelming image, if there's a lot going on there, you might want to try to break it up into quadrants and just look at, each tile for a couple seconds. But honestly, the best information you're going to get will be in the source section. Even the pictures will have like a little paragraph written about it in terms of like telling you what's going on. You have to read that. Both pictures I gave you, in terms of the Mejai Restoration DBQ, the Silk Factory, and the what was it called? What was the boat called from Document 5? It wasn't called the Pleasure Boat. Like the Boat of Peace and Harmony, or whatever it was called. They both gave you titles and like source information, like exactly what you were looking at. And in the boat, it gave you a little background, right? That said that, the Empress Chi Shi, she like embezzled funds. This was meant for a navy. So like, that's the stuff that you attack. I was able to source that saying, hey, this is a time where she was probably feeling threatened from outside influence. So she resorted to building monumental architecture as pictured in the image to boost her image, publicly. I said something like that. Okay. But again, most of Taylor, thank you so much for that. I'll read that when I'm done right now. I really, really appreciate it. Okay. Yeah, I just think with images, they give you so much information in terms of the source. That's really about it. But take a minute, make sure you look at that image. Ask yourself the question of like, how does this image relate to the topic? In the case of the DBQ we just wrote in class, the topic was about non-Western elites and if they modernize their societies. You just have to ask yourself, what does this picture have to do with that? And then when you answer that, chances are you're going to be on the right track. So just be cautious there with images. I know they could be tricky sometimes, but just read the source information. They give you so much. You guys would be surprised. Jared, I hope you heard what I said before about, nobody has to attend class tomorrow. Gianna, I answered that question. I hope you're okay. Taylor. So everyone, Taylor was a great student last year. Unfortunately, it was a COVID year. So her exam was shortened. Taylor ended up just taking the DBQ and she rocked it. She did so well on it. She says, just stay calm and remember, you know more than you think, which is just great advice. For multiple choice, reread the questions before jumping on an answer. If you're stressed during the test, you may misread something, right? So go into this with a calm mind. Taylor also says for essays, try to include as much information as you can. That way, if something misses the point, there's always information to fall back on so you can get the point. So remember in class when I'm telling you, the rubric says use 6 documents. Well, use 7. The rubric saying source 3, source 4 or 5. Just in case you miss. So Taylor, it's what I expect from you, Taylor. Great advice. And then lastly, you guys are going to do great. You got this. You guys are so smart and don't doubt yourselves. Reread any confusing questions, but for the most part, go with your gut. Fantastic. And again, Um, oh no. Oh no. Well, if it isn't Nate Kirsten, my goodness, my old rival, son of a gun. How are you? This is fantastic. I didn't think that going live would put people back on here. Aiden, are you kidding me? Aiden's here too. This is amazing. This is turning into a reunion. Uh, Tim, what? This is amazing. Where's Brian? Get Brian on here. Come on. John Walsh. Fantastic. So fantastic. Oh God, I can't tell you guys. My current students this year, there were so many great relationships I made with students last year before COVID hit. And to have that year cut short was like one of the biggest heartbreaks in 10 years of education. And this is really warming my heart to see all these people come back right now. That's really, really fantastic. Hi, Isabella. So Isabella asks, can you go over again how long we have for each section? Yeah. So what again, what I want you to do right now, just make sure, just make sure that you guys, if you want, if you go to Google and type in AP World History Modern Exam, just like that, AP World History Modern Exam. And if you click the very first link that comes up, if you just scroll down a little bit, just scroll down, you'll see exactly the sections, how much time you have, and everything about it. This is everything I gave you like in class. This is all on Google Classroom. Okay. But that might be a really easy way for you to get there. Again, just go to Google, AP World History Modern, click the first link, AP World History Modern Exam. I'm sorry. Make sure you type in exam. Click that first link and then just scroll down and you'll see exactly where it is. But Isabella, for this review, it's 55 minutes for 55 multiple choice questions, 40 minutes for 3 SAQs, and then a 10-minute break. And then you have an hour and 40 block time to finish the DBQ and 2 SAQs. So an hour for the DBQ and 40 minutes for the 2 SAQs. Okay. Hey, Dan Lin. That was a very, very interesting conversation. Jack, okay, I'm so happy you're doing well. Because of your medical status right now, I believe I reached out and just asked the guidance counselor and guidance department if you could take the exam on June 3rd. If you are allowed access to a computer, I think I would actually just hang back right now until you're officially scheduled to do that. For the setups. So I think we're going to try to get you to take it the 6th because of the concussion. Okay. But thanks for staying on here. Let me just check my email, see if we have any updates. Again, anybody else who has questions about anything, please, please, please be sure to put them in here. See a couple of you guys were getting through a ton of videos and stuff like that in my email. I always get updates. Fantastic. Okay. All right. Yeah, Jack, I would hold off because I think we're going to schedule you for the 3rd. Okay. Thank you, Aiden. Really appreciate that. Yeah, any one of my students who are still on here from last year, if you have any like kind words or any advice, I'm sure my current students would love to hear it. Thank you guys for taking the time to do that. Okay. Johnny Walsh. Oh, I missed those classes. You guys were fantastic last year again. Sorry the year got cut short. Okay, let's check out my questions. Nate, seeing your avatar has made my day. Thank you for that. Alexis, you said, can we skip around or go back to multiple choice questions? Remember the digital exam practice that we took? You cannot skip around. Okay, you have to answer it the best you can and then move on. And my recommendation is that you, even if you are totally unsure about a question, put an answer. Okay, you're there. You have to go ahead and do that. Okay, you have a 25% chance of getting the right answer. So don't skip any multiple choice questions. Okay. Great question, Alexis. Thank you for asking that. Thank you, everyone who's saying good luck. Really appreciate that. So Aiden Lane, can you briefly go over Africa from units 1 and 2? Sure. Let's do this in a nutshell. What's the major trade network that's connecting North and West Africa? The Trans-Saharan Trade Network. That's Global Tapestry and Networks of Exchange, units 1 and 2, 1200 to 1450. Who are the big empires of unit 1? The Mali Empire and Songhai. Mali, remember Mansa Musa, world's wealthiest man. Why was he so wealthy? Why was Mali so wealthy? Just think about the two items that are traded most frequently over the Trans-Saharan Trade Network: gold and salt. There's also slaves transferred during this time, but gold and salt will bring great wealth to the kingdoms of West Africa. Again, that's the Trans-Saharan Trade Network. Think camel caravans, think the spread of Islam into West Africa. Those are the big pieces there with West Africa. Think Swahili Coast being a part of Indian Ocean trade. That's the east coast of Africa. For those of you who are questioning, this is something that we read all the way back in Linda Schaefer's Southernization, which I know before the stream ends, you should give a celebratory seagull call to encourage them. I wish, Aiden, except my daughter's like sleeping right now, and I can't do a quiet seagull. There's only one seagull volume.
You can try.
I can?
And I would love to hear it.
Seagull? Is that good? Okay, Brienne gave me the okay, and hopefully that was a good seagull. Okay. Wife reveal. Yes, this is Brienne back here. You can see her little head. Okay. So yeah, so again, Aiden Lane, Africa units 1 and 2. The only other thing I would Swahili Coast, they're pumping out ivory and gold from Zimbabwe, South African Empire, into the Indian Ocean Trade Network. Just know that they're highly involved in Indian Ocean trade. That would be really good. Okay. But essentially, that's it for Africa units 1 and 2. A bunch of good lucks. Fantastic. Hopefully you guys, I'm getting epic wife on here and wife reveal. Thank you. Marriage must be great. Hi, Mr. Stephenson. How are you? I'm great, Patrick. I miss you so much, bud. I do. Okay. So other questions? Anything along those lines? Exam, content. Again, anybody who's on right now, think in terms of, I don't know who that is, so I'm just going to remove them. So think in terms of content units, any units that you want to talk about. Think in terms of Dan Gervasio. How you doing, bud? And great avatar, by the way. In terms of the exam, whatever you need. So just be mindful there. Aiden Lane, is there any other ways you can get complexity besides a counter argument or fancy pants point? Yeah, I don't recommend them, but if you go to classwork and go on exam prep and scroll down and find the rubrics. Okay. And then go down to the analysis and reasoning category. And you'll see all the ways you can do it in there. And I'm going to see. Like I just posted a portion of the rubric there. That's, that's right from the rubric. Those are the other ways in which you can get complexity. If you're bringing in things from like another class, multiple perspectives across themes, they're very hard. So again, I think the easiest is just counter argument and showing nuance between documents. That's the point I would stick to. Dan Gervasio, yes, but you learn a lot. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Learned a lot and had fun. Nate, appreciate that. Aiden, appreciate it. Dan, so many memories in a short time. I really appreciate that. Yeah, thank you guys. I really appreciate it. Yeah, no, Aiden, honestly, there really is. I would say that I truly am a believer that all freshmen could get a 3, 4, or 5 on this exam. If you're with me the entire year and you're paying attention and you're a diligent student, there's no way you should get less than a 3 on this. The only part of the exam that I feel like freshmen are a little at a disadvantage of are those bullet points under the complexity, because I want you to think about this like in terms of that last bullet point where they're asking you to like use information from another discipline to back up your thesis. You would have to pull from like literally another class some type of concept that backs up your thesis. Now, you as a freshman have only taken like 8 academic classes. Seniors, like I've got Gavin Hersey, and my senior this year, who has taken 4 years worth of classes. He is at a distinct advantage just in terms of that complexity point. So that I just recommend staying away from those and really just trying to hammer out that counter argument. Although XYZ, or whatever that may be. If you remember that formula we talked about in the beginning of the year, I just swear by the counter argument point. Okay, sorry if that's basic, but that's been a tried and true method over the last few years. All right, guys. Anything else? Honestly, I don't think if I were any one of you, I probably wouldn't. I probably wouldn't stay up too late tonight reviewing this information. It's a lot. It might end up stressing you out. I might like play a Kahoot or something like that if you'd like to, from a unit that you're unsure of. Again, they're all on Classroom for you. But just be, treat yourself kindly tonight in terms of your review. Get a good night's sleep. Have that breakfast tomorrow, and just get ready to go. Please, I have to go to school tomorrow. So I'm going to have my Chromebook open, or my MacBook open, and I'll be sitting there with no students in class, waiting for emails, to see what I can answer for you guys. So please don't think you're bothering me tomorrow. I want to be there for you guys up until you take the exam to answer any last minute questions. Okay. Delana, do we need to know the specific ideas of each Enlightenment thinker? No. I would know very generally, like consent of the governed and like natural rights. There's never going to be a point in time. Like, you might get an excerpt from John Locke and it'll tell you it's from John Locke. And the question might be like a very broad question. You're not going to have to like fill in the blank. Who said this? That's not on there. There's no memorization like that on the exam. So French Revolution, in terms of like how it differs from the American Revolution, just like on a surface level, number one, the French Revolution is not a revolution against a mother country, right? The American Revolution is a group of colonists revolting against a mother country. The French Revolution is taking place within France and is calling for a total overhaul of French society. It's calling for the doing away of the ancien regime, right? So essentially, France had been in a really poor financial state for decades, thanks to overspending. But you're welcome, Delana. I hope that made sense. The state of France throughout the 1700s, because of massive war, because of their aiding of the American colonists in the American Revolution, had been in serious amounts of debt because of some of the policies of Louis XIV in terms of expenditures at the Palace of Versailles. That and a series of really poor harvests led to a string of poverty, a string of droughts and famines across France in the 1780s that really led to a boiling point when Louis XVI called the Estates General in roughly 1789. And remember, the estate system was, the clergy, the nobles, and then everyone else. And periodically, the Estates General would meet and decide policy for the French nation. And the problem with this is that the Third Estate was like millions and millions and millions and millions of people. The First and Second Estate were like a couple 100,000. And the First and Second Estate had all the wealth, had all the power, all the influence. And so these people are making the decisions for all of French society without taking into to interest the needs and wants of anyone else. And so when that Estate General meets, we have the tennis court oath, we have the creation of the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen, and we have sort of the birth of the French Revolution as an uprising against the estate system. And then it takes off and devolves into a very violent string of affairs with the Committee of Public Safety, the rise of Maximilien Robespierre, who essentially are killing anyone who's an anti-revolutionary. And then ultimately things get so bad that Napoleon is able to come in and take power because he's a trusted military leader. And he's just extremely popular for a number of reasons. And then, it ultimately is able to seize power as emperor in France. And so you can make the other argument that the American Revolution succeeds in what it attempts to do, and the French Revolution fails ultimately in its overhaul of, French society. So the two really basic commonalities and differences. So ideas sprouting from the Enlightenment and debt from assisting the Americans cause the French Revolution. In addition to a history of egregious abuses of power, arbitrary power, from a series of kings, in addition to the famines that we're talking about. Yeah. No problem, Aiden. And honestly, Aiden, just like in terms of like the curriculum, the main cause of all these revolutions, like, is definitely because of how the curriculum is set up, is definitely going to be like the Enlightenment. The principles of the Enlightenment are the I love how you put so ideas sprouting. I love your usage of the word sprouting there. Think of the Enlightenment as like the casting of the seeds, right? That ultimately sprouted and caused these Atlantic revolutions, Latin American, Haitian American, and French revolutions. Anyone else? Any other questions? Okay. So we had Aiden, and then who is Tyler Brazil? Could you identify yourself for me, please? Again, if Tyler Brazil wants to identify themselves for me, that'd be fantastic. Ashley, it's a lot, main ideas of each unit, but let's do it in a couple words, okay? If you take down, you know, like Unit One, Global Tapestry, and Ashley, can you just verify for me? You can see that I've typed that out, right? Okay, great, fantastic. Um, So if we do these first four, units one and two are 1200 to 1450. Global tapestry, like I said before for Isabella's question, is essentially like the foundational unit where it's just kind of establishing what did the world look like from 1200 to 1450. And unit one covers like Dar al Islam, it covers East Asia in terms of the Song and really the Song dynasty. It covers various African civilizations that Aiden asked before. It covers the Americas in terms of pre-Columbian America, really looking at the Aztecs and Incan civilizations. It covers the Dark Ages of Europe. It's very, very broad in its context. Unit two, networks of exchange, is focused on exactly what that says. Unit two is all about how was this world in 1200 to 1450 connected. And so the big focus of Unit two, if you might remember, was the Silk Roads, the Indian Ocean Trade Network, the Mediterranean Sea Lanes, and the Trans-Saharan trade network. That was the kind of main focus of that. The Mongols were also mentioned in Unit 2, in case you guys forgot. That was the big land-based empire in Unit 2. Unit 3, land-based empires, was all about 1450 to 1750, the growth of several land-based empires, most notably the Qing dynasty in China and the Mughals, Safavids, and Ottomans of the Middle East, India, and Persia, respectively. So Unit 3 was all about how these empires grew, gunpowder, most likely, how they grew, and then how they maintained their powers, how they generated revenue for their states. So if you go back to those videos, you'll see that I looked at how each of them kept power, expanded power, and like maintained, themselves as big empires. Unit 4 we mentioned before when I broke down, I think for Carolyn, transoceanic interconnections. It's the age of exploration and the consequences of exploration in terms of colonization and resistance, the African slave trade, cash crop, sugarcane plantations, all that stuff. Unit 5, revolutions, that's what we've been talking about. Aiden Lane asked a couple questions on that. Unit 5, revolutions, was Enlightenment to start, leading into the Atlantic revolutions, American, Latin American, Haitian, and French, and then ending with the Industrial Revolution. Unit 6 was consequences of industrialization. So that like is a logical, point here. And again, units 5 and 6 were both 1750 to 1900. Unit 6 was basically, okay, we ended Unit 5 with the Industrial Revolution. What were the consequences of the Industrial Revolution? And so one of the major consequences was that Europe begins to take over the world. Remember, we called that imperialism. And then we took a look at one of the motivating factors in European imperialism was the concept of M&Ms, markets and materials. Okay, so that was kind of the main consequence. But then you also have this, you also have the various effects of the Industrial Revolution in terms of increasing world population, increase in urbanization, environmental impacts. You have a kind of a variety of things in there. So it's not just imperialism. Unit 7, global conflicts. That's really kind of the lead up to World War I, the interwar period in World War II. Unit 8, which we unfortunately couldn't really get to, was the Cold War. I gave you tons of videos though. Hopefully they helped. Cold War and decolonization. Unit 8 is all about after World War II. World War II ends in 1945, and the period from 1945 to about 1991 is generally considered in global history the Cold War, which is like an ideological war between the Soviet Union and the United States. They're the two big superpowers in the world at the time, and they're on opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of how they see the world and what they think good economy and good politics looks like. And so that era, 1945 to about 1990, 1991, is marked by like this intense superpower conflict. I also put decolonization in Unit 8. That's one of the Heimler videos he goes over. Decolonization, I want you to think about this. After a lot of the major powers in World War I and World War II get done fighting, we essentially have a lot of those powers exhausted and they cannot keep up their colonies anymore. And so you have a ton of independence movements that takes place in the 1940s, 1950s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, because these former colonial powers like France, Great Britain, the Netherlands, Germany, they cannot maintain their colonies anymore because they're so weakened from fighting the world wars. And then Unit 9 is, I think, perhaps the simplest. It's a world that you live in. It's the globalized world. Unit 9 is just focusing on the interconnectivity, the interconnectedness of our world. And honestly, you just need to look around your room to prove that point right now. if you pick up various objects in your room, you're undoubtedly going to be looking at things that were made in Egypt, Cambodia, Thailand, Vietnam, Taiwan, China, right? You might have fruit in your refrigerator right now that was grown in Chile or Argentina or Peru or something along those lines. We live in a world in which we have immediate access to communication and information, thanks to thanks to inventions like computer systems and the internet infrastructure. We have goods traveling around the world right now as we speak, via airplane and shipping containers. And basically, Unit 9 is all about how our world is a very small place today, thanks to all of these technological innovations. And again, you are a global consumer today. The fact that I could go live on YouTube and reach all of you right now, and the fact that I'm looking around my room right now, and like you would get overwhelmed at the amount of things you see that like were made in a different country, but like somehow, some way, made their way into your house. Unit 9 is all about that concept of globalization, interconnectivity. If you couldn't finish all the Heimler videos for Unit 9, I posted like 2 very short videos that do a great breakdown of globalization that give you basically everything you need to know. So you guys can check that out too. Ashley, I hope that was like a little helpful for you. That was a big question, but hopefully that was okay. Again, Tyler Brazil, you never said who you were. I don't quite know, but your question was, why did absolutism fail in England where it succeeded in the rest of Europe? I mean, did it succeed in the rest of Europe? You have the French Revolution, which overthrows Louis. You have a return of the Bourbon dynasty, but not anywhere near the absolutism of the 14th and 15th century. It fails in England. I guess you can go back to the English Civil War and the rise of Parliament, very, very early on. The creation of the Magna Carta, perhaps in the 13th century, is what you're looking for. I'm not really sure where that question comes from. I don't know who you are. And to be honest with you, that's not necessarily an AP World History question, but hopefully I helped you there with the Magna Carta, the rise of Parliament, and the English Civil War. Go take an AP Euro class. You're welcome, Ashley. I'm glad that helped. Gabby, any tips for multiple choice? Yeah. Remember, get rid of absolutes for multiple choice. If you see a question that uses something like never, always, all, that's not the right answer. Just kind of taking your time, reading the stimulus, really understanding this, the stimulus would be very, very helpful for multiple choice questions. Okay. Aiden Lane says, what land power will be most prevalent in the exam? I have no idea. Let's break this down right now. Land empire. So if we take this, if we do a logical approach to this, units 3, 4, 5, and 6 are statistically the most likely. Units 3, 4, 5, and 6 are statistically the most likely that you'll see. So unit 3, there's like no big land empire. It's all, unit 4 is like all maritime empires. Unit 3, it's probably going to be like the Ottomans or the Qing dynasty of China. Unit 5 is all revolutions. There's like no new dynasties mentioned. Unit 6, consequences of industrialization. Again, it's all like a continuation of European maritime dynasties. The Mongols are in unit 2. That's 8% of the exam. No, you might get a question on the Mongols, but they're not going to dominate the exam. I would say probably the Ottomans or the Qing dynasty. If I had to guess, that's kind of a crazy question, though. Sorry, Aiden. Delana, could you briefly review the Ottoman Empire? Yeah, so they're founded in about the 13th century in what you and I would call Turkey today. They're founded by Turkish individuals who have migrated from what you and I would call Central Asia. No, that's okay, and don't apologize. It's helpful to think about this stuff out loud. There's definitely no need to apologize. Yeah, the Ottomans, founded in about the 13th century. Sorry, in the collapse of the Abbasid dynasty, in the wake of the Mongol invasions of the Middle East, the Ottomans are founded by a man by the name of Osman Bey. That's where the name Ottoman comes from. They are Turkic in their ethnicity, so at their heart, they are a semi-nomadic people. Very similar to the Mongols in their historic origins. And over the course of a few centuries, they adopt Islam and they rise to prominence with a few rulers, most notably Suleiman the Magnificent and Mehmed the Conqueror, who in 1453 sacks and sieges the city of Constantinople and renames it Istanbul. They are Sunni Islam. They have the Janissary Corps, who the elite military. They use the Devshirme system to essentially take Christian boys from the Balkan and like elitely train them for their entire lives, putting them into government and military. They use a system of taxation known as tax farming. That's all in the videos of my Ottoman Empire. And at their peak, they cover most of the Middle East, Turkey, Southeast Europe, the Balkan Peninsula, and most of Northern Africa. By the time World War I rolls around, they are basically the sick man of Europe. This is a common way to explain them. They're weakened over time. They try to go through something in the 1860s known as the Tanzimat reforms, but they're largely a failure. And essentially, they are one of the non-Western states that tries to they try to reinvent themselves. They try to reform, and they're just unsuccessful. And by the time World War I is over, they cease to exist. Can you briefly go over the origins of Kievan Rus in the Russian Empire? It's not really a part of the exam. I don't foresee it being on there, but Kievan Rus is basically being developed in the area that you and I would call like around Moscow today. It's again very close in the 9th, 10th centuries. It's very close to Constantinople. So it's Eastern Orthodox in its religion. And, eventually there are several Moscow-based princes who overthrow the Golden Horde of the Mongols and establish what you and I could call the origins of the Russian Empire in the 13 and 1400s. And then ultimately, I guess, like you can talk about Ivan the Great and Ivan the Terrible in the 14 and 1500s, and then ultimately Peter the Great in the 1600s, trying to modernize Russia. But honestly, Aiden, I wouldn't worry about it too much, like at all. No problem, Delana. Russia's not super specific in the curriculum. It's also like a major, I'll admit, Aiden, it's like a major weakness of mine, Russian history, outside of the Soviet Union. So in terms of Kievan Rus, I really would be surprised if it's on there. I'd be very surprised. Anybody else right now, guys? We're to the multiple choice. It could be primary source, secondary source, map, chart, graph. Could be an illustration, could be a photograph, could be anything. All of them are used. You really have a nice assortment there. Good question, Aiden. Anyone else? Guys, if that's it, this was a doozy. There were lots of really good questions. Thank you so much for attending this. This was more popular than I thought it would be. I always appreciate that. Please get a good night's sleep tonight. You wake up tomorrow, have a breakfast. You are so much more capable than you know. It's been a pleasure to call myself your teacher this year. I know you're going to do fantastically well. Please remember, in the event that you take this thing tomorrow and you just feel as though you didn't do well, first of all, you never know. You have no idea how you did on this thing, okay? But if you end up not doing as well as you want, if you get your score back in July, just remember that you are more than just a number. I have had a great time with every single one of my students this year. It's been a pleasure to, like I said, call yourself my teacher. I think so highly of each and every one of you for staying in the class this year, for not dropping it, even if you tried to drop it. I really thank you so much for staying with me. You've proved yourself over and over again by leaps and bounds. You are going to be a stronger student in your future classes for having gone through this experience this year. And that's what matters. You get a 3, 4, or 5 on this exam, awesome. That's the icing on the cake to a very successful year that was done, mind you, in a global pandemic. So thank you very much. I look forward to hearing from you tomorrow. I look forward to seeing my B-Day students on Friday and my A-Day students on Monday. And again, what are we doing on Friday and Monday? What exactly are we going to be doing in class? Let me type it out for you. It's all downhill from here. You give it your last push, you give it your last effort tomorrow, and then we're done. And if you give it your all, if you've done it like the way it should be done this year, it's going to feel so good come 3 hours and 15 minutes after 12 p.m. tomorrow. It'll feel very rewarding. Okay. Have a great rest of the night, my friends. Thank you, Patrick, John, Aiden, anyone from last year, Nate, Tim, anybody else who was on here from last year, Taylor. I really, really appreciate that. Tyler Brazil, I don't know who you are, but have a nice night. Maybe it's day where you are. I'm not sure. Sarah, thank you very much. See you guys.